Ahora sí, ahora sí. Ahora sí. Muy buenas, gente. Tenemos directito de los desarrolladores. Va a comenzar muy pronto, se supone. Debería ya estar comenzando. Puede que estén retrasados. Y esto ha salido pues un poquito de improviso. Bueno, yo ya sabía que iban a hacer un directo hasta ahora, pero la verdad es que me tomó... Me topó con el tiempo pues bastante ajustado. En todo caso, estoy hablando y no hay absolutamente nadie de momento en el directo. Estoy hablando solo, pues claro. Y para todos los que lo vayan a ver resubido, básicamente voy a estar traduciendo un poco el tema del pues de este directo de los desarrolladores. Espero que se escuche bien. Yo no lo estoy escuchando. Va a comenzar, momento, yo no lo estoy escuchando. Esto. Ahora sí lo estoy escuchando.
A new festering curse now spreads its corruption across the land. More dangerous.
Vamos a ir cambiando el título del directo.
Than I could have imagined. I have found a way to stop this plague. To rip the dark power of these monsters from their very core and turn it to our advantage in destroying them.
Ok. Entonces tenemos básicamente directo de los desarrolladores. Y tengo aquí un pequeño texto que pueden ver que puedo escribir. Ups, claro, no se va a ver con ese color. Cambiar color, pongámoslo en blanco. Hola. Ups, letra equivocada. Ah, mierda.
Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to
Nos
another
dicen,
Diablo 4 Campfire Chat.
claro,
My name is Adam Fletcher.
buen,
I am the Associate Director of Community here
no
on
te
Diablo.
sean buen
Joined
viernes.
here by Joe Shelley, Game Director for Diablo 4. Mr. Joe Pipora, which you guys know of, because, and Joe as well.
Ahora sí puedo escribir.
Familiar faces. Associate Director for Diablo 4, and of course, Adam Jackson. Brand new face here.
Ahora sí se puede.
El
caso. Vamos a ir escribiendo el resumen de lo que vayan diciendo. Y nos están básicamente presentando de momento los señores.
Maybe we do like a battle royale or something like that to, you know, determine who talks next or whatever. But I will say we actually do have a lot to talk about. In fact, I would almost say this is like dev update.
Ojo, nos dicen que esta debería ser algo así como una actualización de desarrollo.
But we do have a lot to talk about, specifically around patch 1.1.1. Did I say enough?
Van a hablar, claro, del parche 1.1.1.
1.1, patch 1.1.1. We are going to talk about some balance changes that are going to be coming to that patch. And of course, we're also going to be talking about the dates of when that patch is actually going to be hitting, along with when.
Van a hablar de la fecha de cuándo van a salir este parche.
Which will be well before the actual patch does actually hit, but we'll talk about that.
También van a hablar un poco de las notas de parche.
I know we do want to jump right into it because we do have a ton to talk about. So I will actually throw it over here to Adam Jackson because I know he wants to talk a little bit about kind of like the class balance and what we're thinking about for 1.1.1.
Yeah, totally. Glad to be here. We have a lot to talk about. So, first of all, I'll kind of frame this in our goals and what we're going to be doing in this patch in the immediate future, and then
van a hablar, claro, de los
kind of how the class team feels about classes and kind of what we're thinking in a more mid to long.
Las metas que tienen para este parche, claro.
So, for this patch, we've
para
got
este
a lot
parche,
going on. One of our goals is
y una de sus metas es,
we want to kind of improve the effectiveness and the fun of the sorcerer and the barbarian.
Vale, van a modificar al mago y al bárbaro para aumentar su efectividad.
Because they both have, you know, kind of different things going on. For the sorcerer in this patch, we're focusing on reducing something that we call kiss curse mechanics, which is kind of, I know, a very designery term, but it's this idea that we give you a really cool power effect, and then we kind of take something away or make it nerfed or nerf some other part of you in some way, usually for balance reasons, to make sure that it's not just, you know, out of control in power.
Yeah, usually the idea there is, like, to your point, it's like, so we really have, like, you know, 20% we can afford to give you, but if we take 10% of something else away, we can give you 30% or 45% and feel a little bit better about that.
Exactly. Usually it's to sell a fantasy in a really strong way, but we can't, like, do that justifiably without just breaking
Y evidentemente te dicen que no
but we
pueden
found out in a lot of ways we've been
pues
a
potenciar a lo
little too
loco.
harsh with that, and so we're going to try and reduce or remove that in some cases. And then the other one is late game survivability. We know that the sorcerers typically have a tough time, you know, when they start pushing those later Nightmare Dungeon tiers, and so we're going to be looking at ways to increase that specifically. And an example of that curse mechanic is the Serpentine aspect. If you know that one, it's the one where you can spawn an additional Hydra, but it reduces the duration of your Hydras. That's just no longer going to reduce the duration, it's actually going to increase it. So that's an example of something. We'll go into more detail later.
No se está viendo
for the
bien.
Barbarian, we're focusing on improving the early game and making it feel better and just more fluid. We're going to be improving the Fury generation that you get from your basic skills.
Vale, están hablando ahora del bárbaro.
The late game for the Barbarian by making a lot of their uniques more attractive and effective. So you're going to see later when we go through the notes that you know, we're going to be changing around usually about one affix per unique, from something that really isn't that attractive for players to something that they really, really want, which we think will help make those items really exciting.
Now, when we make changes to items, specifically items like uniques, many of these changes only take effect on new items, right? Like, I think we have an example of the Hellhammer here.
Yeah, kind of. It's a little bit more complex than that.
Ok, están aquí mostrando un cambio que van a hacer a este legendario.
When we update a unique item, we actually update Hellhammer in two different ways. So we're increasing the duration that the ground is going to be ignited and burning, and we're
están
also
aumentando
damage, and that's the actual unique
el poder del
power,
legendario como tal.
that the item does.
Y también estoy
You can see
viendo
here on Hellhammer, we're also doing another
que le
change
están cambiando
where
las
we're
estadísticas.
actually granting you bonus critical strike damage and
Ojo.
removing the bonus damage to crowd control enemies.
Vale.
Right? So on the left, what you see here,
Básicamente
when
le
you
han
log
puesto
into the
crítico al
game,
martillo,
you
lo
know,
cual
after
está
this
bastante
patch,
bien.
the left version is what you're going to get. So you're not going to get the critical strike damage change or the actual item affix there, the rule changed, but you are going to get the updates to the upheaval, lasting longer and doing more damage. On the right, when you find your new items after the patch, you're going to get the new affixes, the new rules and things on the item.
So new versions of these items will have all of the buffs we're talking about.
New versions will have everything new, and the old versions will get
Vale.
the new stuff on the actual legendary effects. But
Van a
they will
cambiar
have
legendarios,
the new
a
items.
mejorar legendarios.
Thank you.
En ese caso es un único, si no me
so
recuerdo.
going back to kind of other things that we're looking at. So that's the Sorcerer and the Barbarian what we're focusing on. Then generally across all classes, we're doing a few other things as well. We're looking at builds that aren't really hitting a high enough power level, and we're going to be just buffing them and increasing the power of them, so they should feel better and be more competitive. We're also going to be looking at increasing the attractiveness of kind of uniques across the board. We're focusing on Sorcerer and Barbarian for this patch, but we actually believe that we can do this kind of thing across the board. There's a lot of uniques that we think aren't really hitting the mark. It's something that's kind of a tough thing that we talk about a lot on the team, because, you know, the roles and the things that the uniques have as far as their item power are all fixed, right? They can't re-roll different stats all over the place. So we could very easily just make, you know, all uniques really good by putting all the best stats on the items, right? That's an easy thing to do for us. But we kind of have a push and pull there where we don't want to just make all of them clearly the best items in the game because they have all the best stats and they have really
Dicen que
good
claro,
powers.
no pueden
We want there
simplemente ser
to
los
be
únicos,
something
los
that's
mejores
going to be
objetos del juego.
attractive about them, and you have to kind of think of how you're
Y
going
claro,
to
tienen que irlo balanceando un poco.
But we think that we are just not hitting the mark on a lot of them, so we're boosting them a little bit and then just kind of seeing how that goes. Next, we're going to be looking at opening up build-specific designs to be more widely useful. So there's a lot of effects on legendary powers and in other places where, you know, this effect only works in a very narrow use case, like only on a single skill or a single group of skills, or we're using a certain proc to get it. And in many cases, we're just going to open that up to be more widely usable so that players can actually, you know, use them in more different builds or different ways. One example of this that we'll go over later is Chain Lightning's upgrade.
Básicamente están diciendo que van a modificar algunas.
The bounces of Chain Lightning do bonus damage when it bounces off of you. And we're going to change that so that it just does bonus damage when it bounces off of anything. So instead of being kind of a narrow use case where you're only using it like on a boss,
evidentemente van a ser mejoras generales para las habilidades, y aquí daban un ejemplo de cómo van a mejorar pues esta habilidad del mago, que es el rayo que va rebotando básicamente. Hola Puño, bienvenido al directo, y estoy bien.
About sort of our things that we want to
Espero que tú
do,
también estés bien.
like going forward in the game, other things we want to do. Not all of that stuff is in this patch.
Yeah,
right?
no, we have a lot of talks on our team. We have a lot of things that we're thinking about and going on. I thought it'd be really good also to kind of talk a little bit about, how we feel about more longer term goals and things about the game. So these aren't coming in this patch, but things that we're thinking about that'll come in the future that the team's kind of focused on. The first one is kind of finding ways to bring different types of damage closer together. As I'm sure many of you in the community know, vulnerable and crit are really, really strong right now. Kind of a lot of the meta is about,
que quieren que quieren como juntar más los daños, es extraño.
Stack as much crit strike chance and crit damage as you can, and then you blow them up.
Ah, supongo que se refiere a
Our game actually was
que quieren equilibrar, por así
other types of
decirlo, los
builds
diferentes
that
tipos de
aren't only
daño.
those in mind, right? We have like damage over time or dot damage, things like firewall or shadow necro does a lot of this. We also have overpower as a mechanic in our game, and these other different ways to build your character. We want them to have parity with vulnerable and crit damage. So we're going to be trying to find. Our goal is to find a way, and we're working on it right now.
Es equilibrar los daños para que sean tan útiles o tan buenos como vulnerable y crítico, por ejemplo.
A crit build or a damage over time build, you will be relatively equal in power to all the other different types of play.
De tal manera en que, pues, si tú eliges no tener vulnerables y eliges en vez de eso tener otro tipo de daño, pues estés más o menos en el mismo nivel de poder que los demás.
And what I mean by this is we have a lot of legendary powers and effects that like spawn a new thing. An example of this is like on the Barbarian, there's some legendary powers that spawn earthquakes or dust devils. Another one is the Necromancer has like things that leave shadow trails on the ground that deal damage. And these things, they deal what we call flat damage, which is like we give it a damage number, and then that's how much it does. And then that damage number kind of scales with player level. But what we find is that a lot of these things are really good in the early and mid game when they drop, but then when you get to the really late game, they kind of fall off really hard. And what we want to do is find ways to add scaling so that the player can opt into, like making a build out of these things.
A ver, existen habilidades dentro del juego que hacen daño básicamente plano. Habilidades de legendarios que simplemente aparecen y hacen un poco de daño. Y dicen que son muy buenas al inicio del juego, pero son muy malas al final. Entonces quieren modificar eso para que sean más útiles al final. Y dicen que, pues claro, se siente muy bien al inicio porque los equipas y explotas absolutamente todo. Y luego hacia el final del juego, pues no son tan buenas.
So that's kind of something that we're thinking about in the mid to long term to make the game kind of open up and have more builds available.
So we've been talking here a little bit about sort of our philosophy here. We're about to get into patch notes. We're about to talk about Sorcerer. But we thought that it was important to talk a little bit about this philosophy, both because we want to be very transparent in terms of like how we're thinking about the game and what kinds of, like why we're making changes, both so that when you see changes, you can understand what we're thinking, like what we're going for, and also so that we can incorporate feedback from the community, feedback from you into these kinds of changes.
Yeah, and that goes down even to the format for this particular live stream, right? Yeah. So like we're gonna go through a lot of details really, really soon, which I think people are really excited about. I hope people are really excited about because we're gonna have a lot of those. And then afterwards, we want to hear back from the community about like how like this was,
okay,
like, how this worked. Like, was this the best way to get this information? Did you get a lot of good data from us, and do you understand why we're doing making the changes that we are? Right. And to Joe's point, again, it is really useful for you to understand these things. It's going to help with the feedback that you give us back.
Básicamente están diciendo que pues les demos feedback, que les demos opiniones al respecto.
You guys are about to see a ton of slides here in a second, going through pretty much all the different detailed balance changes across the classes, but then, like we said, like we do plan on.
Dicen que básicamente ahora nos van a mostrar un montón de cambios que vamos a verlos. Y que claro, luego las notas de parche deberían tener pues un montón más de información con todo lo que son los arreglos. Ok, eso es importante. ¿Y cuándo van a lanzar las notas del parche?
Now you're just going to spoil it. We're actually going to release patch notes, full patch notes. You guys will see these patch notes first here on the stream, but
vale, vamos a ver las notas del parche ahora.
Next Wednesday, on August
2nd, y so that van a liberarlos el Wednesday. ¿Cuándo es Wednesday? Oh, mierda, ¿cuándo es Wednesday?
what we do want to do is we do want to jump straight into the balance changes and so forth.
Yeah.
And we do want to start off with the sorcerer. So we have a lot of different slides and changes here that we do want to
Miércoles.
detail. So
Ok,
Adam, I know what's good
para
Yeah,
el...
totally. So I think what I'll do is just give you a few moments to look at the screen and kind of see what we're doing.
Ok,
and talk high
tenemos
level
cambios
about
para el
some of
bárbaro.
the
Primero nos
bigger
dicen que
changes here. So,
Flickering Bolt, Firebolt,
we're changing Firebolt to
Flickering
generate
Firebolt
mana when you hit enemies. Before it was
cambia
only generating
a
the burning enemy.
que ahora
So
regenera
you
2 de
would just
maná
try and
cuando
cast
golpea a un
Firebolt,
enemigo,
without
luego
doing anything else.
bola de
You
fuego,
always
Firebolt.
miss the first hit of the mana. I always
Yeah,
felt bad a lot.
that always felt bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it says negative feedback. It's gonna
Una
make it,
potenciación, ahora aumenta
still
su
feel nice, not
radio.
burning things and piercing, but
Y
you just get it more often.
la otra potenciación
Probably another big one here is the
aumenta el
lightning
daño
change
crítico. Al
I
parecer
talked
este
about,
bono se
where every time
aumenta un
that it bounces,
30% si
it's
golpea
damage,
a 30 más enemigos. Ok, daño de área, está bastante bien. Luego,
Luego,
cadena de rayos. Mierda, no lo he leído, pero ahí lo podemos revisar más tarde. Nos dice que las pasivas también se han cambiado. Se ha aumentado aquí un poquito pues de daño. Pues bono de crítico a lo que vendrían a ser a bosses. Y después, cuando quemas enemigos, aumentas un 20% el daño. Además, incrementas más el daño. Pues que reciben al parecer de los que queman. Estos son cambios al Paragón. Aquí aumentan el crítico, si no me equivoco. Aquí aumentan el daño según inteligencia, dependiendo pues del nodo. Aumenta la reducción de daño, eso es bueno para el mago. Aumentar de nuevo reducción de daño para el mago de 10 a 15 en diferentes nodos. Y de 3 a 25 en otro nodo, ok. Y luego aumentan nuevamente el incremento de reducción de daño. Asumo que por punto en otro nodo, ok, vale. Aumentan básicamente el crítico, un poquito el daño y la resistencia del mago en el Paragon. Hay más cambios en el Paragon aquí. Por cierto, está interrumpiendo las letras. Vamos a un momento, perdón. Asumo que está molestando las letras. Vamos a desaparecerlas un momento. Ok. No lo he leído, pero asumo que son más cambios al Paragon. Luego aquí tenemos cambios a los legendarios. Veo bonos. Esto parece ser pues, daño, duración a las hidras.
Crit damage of meteor only and only against healthy enemies. So it was one skill and only healthy enemigos. Now it's going to work on meteor and fireball and you get half of the bonus.
Estoy escuchando lo que están diciendo. Al parecer una de estas habilidades, no sé cuál, no la estoy encontrando, va a aumentar además el crítico que infliges a los enemigos. Vale, es este. Entiendo. Tenemos regeneración de maná. Para el mago, más bonos a cadena de rayos. Más duración de velocidad de movimiento, bonos de velocidad de movimiento aumentan también. Reducción de daño, aumenta mucho, ojo. Si no me equivoco, puede que me esté equivocando, pero aumenta la reducción de daño. Y nuevamente otro incremento de daño, ok. Interesante, ya hemos visto que aumenta la reducción de daño en el Paragon, también lo están haciendo los legendarios. Tenemos aquí más incrementos de daño. Incremento al parecer a la cantidad de segundos que te vuelves imparable, junto con una bonificación de armadura por un par de segundos, eso está bastante bien. Lucky Hit, odio el Lucky Hit, que es básicamente el golpe afortunado. Pues ahora puede restaurar mana, está bastante bien. Mientras estás con Blizzard, con tormenta de hielo, con ventisca, como quieras llamarlo. Oh, mierda, no alcanza a leer, pero parece que eran más bonos de daño. Interesante. Ahí tenemos un cambio a un único. Se reduce una penalización de daño. ¿Había penalización de daño? Ok. Cambian el afijo de, pues, de daño a stuneados a regeneración de recursos. Reduce la distancia. Que al parecer... No entiendo esto. Y luego dice que hace más fácil golpear a los enemigos con bola de fuego. Esto que dice, reduce la distancia, vale, que requieres para que pues vaya rebotando básicamente de 3 a 2.5. Esto probablemente sean metros o pies o lo que sea. Interesante, hacen un pequeño de balance aquí.
And since this thing, bounces and hits enemies a lot of time, the lucky hit procs are very powerful with this. So we think this will be a lot more attractive for players.
Entonces aquí hay un pequeño desbalance. Pasamos con el bárbaro. Sí, está diciendo justamente ahora que están incrementando básicamente la cantidad de furia que regeneras con cada, pues, con un montón de cosas. Ganas daño con muchas habilidades también, por lo que veo se incrementa el daño, aumenta, parece que ahí decía que aumentaba la duración de vulnerables que aplicaba. Se ha vuelto, perfecto. Vulnerables, la duración de vulnerables se incrementa de 2 a 4 segundos. Interesante. Mucho vulnerable en realidad, 4 segundos de vulnerable es bastante. Que aplica carga, por cierto. Interesante. Entonces, básicamente aquí tenemos aumento de daño, varias habilidades y tenemos aumento de regeneración de furia para algunas habilidades básicas. Ojo, para habilidades básicas.
Other gear that you have and so forth. So this is just the baseline number, and you have to remember that obviously when that number gets tweaked, everything else gets tweaked. That gets.
Want to point that out too when we do like damage increases, where it might seem small because it's increasing the base that everything else multiplies and scales on. It can be a bit. I mean,
por cierto, si está escuchando bien, espero que sí.
Right, but it's scary and risky. So we have to think about that because it's very easy to be like, oh, just make it 20. And now, late game, you're just like bashing once and then getting all your fury back or something, right? So.
Okay.
All right, so violent upheaval. This one gives you berserking, and it used to be that you had to damage 2 or more enemies or 3 or more enemies to get a better buff, and now we're adding bosses.
Habilidades.
So boss fight, you're just
otra habilidad que
chain that berserking again, making it usable in a part of the game where it didn't used to be.
Te ayuda mucho más a luchar contra bosses. Al parecer, bonos a Berserker aumentan la cantidad de segundos y puede dañar, parece, a más enemigos. No sé, estoy leyendo rápido. Pasivas, aumenta la reducción de daño. Aumenta el daño de sangrado, al parecer. Aumenta el daño de Berserker. Aquí una pequeña corrección, al parecer. Y luego Arsenal Andante básicamente aumenta la duración de 6 a 8 segundos. No sé cómo se llama esta habilidad en español, pero dice aquí Walking, que es básicamente como andante, caminante, arsenal, como arsenal andante, arsenal, básicamente pues que va caminando o que va andando. Básicamente esto es es más daño, claro, para todo lo que es el bárbaro y un poquito de reducción de daño. Los legendarios tenemos incremento de daño, incremento ojo de espinas, incremento... Vale, incremento de del costo que te devuelven cuando utilizas habilidades core, habilidades principales, y se agrega la funcionalidad de que funciona también con voces. Ojo, no. Que no funcionara con voces antes, pues bastante mal. Se incrementa pues aquí un poquito más el daño. Se incrementa, pues parece que eran puros incrementos de daño, no los alcancé a ver bien. Únicos, ojo, tenemos muchos cambios para los únicos del bárbaro, al parecer. Más daño, más daño. Y reemplazos pues de afijos.
So Fields of Crimson, this is the one where you do blood pools when you rupture enemies.
Vale, veo.
We're increasing the damage, we're increasing the
Básicamente
damage
esto es puro aumento de daño y un par de cambios a algunos afijos que parece que están bastante bien porque, por ejemplo, aquí cambias daño físico por vulnerables, eso está bastante bien. Cambias daño contra stuneados por velocidad de movimiento, eso podría pues estar más o menos, aunque podría estar bastante bueno también. Cooldown reduction. Vale, reducción de ruptura por crítico. Entiendo. Básicamente los únicos del bárbaro están siendo prácticamente rediseñados para hacer mucho más daño. ¡Ojo! Pícaro, este me gusta. Luego, bueno, han vuelto, pues algo más tiene que decir.
Adam, you've been working on. We don't want to leave the other 3 classes out, right?
Yeah, totally.
Most of these changes are on that you've seen are for Sork and Barb, but I think we had some time to make some changes to the other classes.
We totally did, so we can go on here.
Ok, dicen que básicamente se enfocaron principalmente en el bárbaro y en el mago, pero hicieron un par de cambios a otras clases también. Aquí nos dicen que, a ver, aumentan la energía que devuelve estabilidad.
Probably one of the more big ones here is
Primary
Force
arrow,
Arrow,
change
so that every time that you third cast of the arrow just pierces all enemies, which is a pretty big just generic bonus.
No entiendo bien qué dice aquí, pero básicamente es como aquí hay un bufo, aquí hay un cambio relativamente importante, pero no tengo referencia sobre qué está haciendo este cambio. Pero al parecer algo ahora funciona cada 3 golpes. Luego, incrementa un pequeño bono de daño de Caltrup. No sé cuál es Caltrup. Aumentan un pequeño poco de daño a lo que vendría a ser veneno y no leí lo último lamentablemente. Bien, las pasivas de victimizar está ganando una bonificación a lo que vendría a ser Lucky Hit, eso me gusta. Me gusta victimizar bastante, pero no la uso porque es bastante mala. Ragged, no sé qué mierda es esto. Reduce daño contra... no alcancé a leer. Muchos cambios, tengo que realizarlos luego. Únicos, Wind Force, el arco, todos los stats se reemplazan con... ¿What? Vale. El afijo de todos los stats se reemplaza con vulnerable. Y Ward no sé qué... Damage, daño por cooldown. Bueno, está bastante bien. Pasamos con el druida. De la misma manera que al bárbaro se le aumentó la regeneración de espíritu de las habilidades básicas. Veo también aquí incrementos de daño. Incremento de daño, incremento de velocidad, incremento de fortificación. En general, solo buffos para el druida. Eso está bastante bien. Sus habilidades veo aumento de daño, una función adicional que aumenta más el daño de los cuervos, interesante. Luego overtime increase, ojo, más tiempo de overtime, interesante. Reducción de costos, más daño, reducción de costos. No, esto aumenta la regeneración de costos. Y lo último, Lucky Hit pasa de Overload, pasa de 20 a 40, interesante. Interesante. Pasamos con el nigromante. Nos dicen que las habilidades parece que están aumentando el cooldown de espíritu de huesos. Eso es un nerfeo. Luego en el Paragon reducen un poco la bonificación de willpower, es decir, de voluntad. También están haciendo aquí un poquito de nerfeos al nigromante, pero aumentan también pues la potencia de voluntad. O sea, reduce la cantidad pero aumentan la potencia, interesante. Legendarios, veo aquí que tenemos una bonificación de daño por lo que veo. No sé si antes tenía tiempo de recuperación esto, pero bueno.
The way that this used to work was Sever would spawn a pool of blight under enemies, and the chance was based on you critting them. So the idea was you would create a crit build, and then you turn your crit into these pools of damage, right? That sounds kind of cool. But turns out, you know,
Vale.
crit doesn't work with dots at all. So that
Al
pool
parecer se han
doesn't get
cambiado
scaled
dos
with the way
legendarios,
you
pero
make
no
the
sé
pool.
qué hacían
It
antes.
just
No
doesn't
conozco
work.
los
Design and
legendarios del
testing
nigromante.
for
Así que
that.
aquí tenemos
But
dos
now we're
legendarios que
changing
han
it so we just
cambiado
have the damage
literalmente
enemies
cómo
to spawn
funcionan.
those pools of light, so now this can actually be more friendly
Así
for
que, pues eso hay que verlo. Hay
and
que ver
then
cómo está el
aspect
nigromante en
of
ese
exposed
sentido.
flesh, this one used to have the same effect, but only when hitting vulnerable enemies with bone skills. So now
Vale.
you can just get we have a new resource mechanic for all the necromancer specs that aren't bone.
Vale, básicamente el segundo legendario es que lo hicieron global para todos, para todas las habilidades, básicamente. Más legendarios, tenemos aquí un pequeño aumento de daño, interesante. Aumenta, wow, aumenta en mucho la probabilidad de, pues, de regeneración de esencias, está muy interesante. El cooldown del golem, pues, reducen la reducción de cooldown, básicamente. Básicamente pequeñas potenciaciones al golem por aquí, interesante. Y el único, hay solamente un cambio a un único, en el cual cambian un afijo de inteligencia por un bono de velocidad de movimiento. Eso también podría llegar a ser un pequeño nerfeo. El nigromante utiliza inteligencia como habilidad estadística principal, y eso significa que gana daño con inteligencia. Ahora, cambios a los monstruos, los minions, básicamente los bichos sus ataques ahora. Vale, los... Wait. No entendí eso, no sé si los monstruos infligen menos daño a los minions, por ejemplo, del nigromante, o viceversa, que los minions del nigromante reducen el daño que le hacen a los enemigos. Debería ser al revés, debería ser que los enemigos no te hacen tanto daño a tus bichos. Hay un pequeño cambio a un corazón maligno. Vale, había un corazón maligno que te daba, pues, reducción de daño elemental, y pues la reducción de daño elemental no sirve para nada, la han cambiado por reducción de daño puro y duro. Temerity, espérate, temeridad son mis pantalones, me gustaban bastante. Hay un cambio de temeridad, dice que todos los stats ha sido reemplazado por vida máxima. La barrera ahora se basa en tu vida máxima, no se basaba en tu vida máxima, y ahora cuenta apropiadamente con las condiciones de revisar que los jugadores tienen barrera. No entendí el tema de temeridad. Temeridad me gusta bastante, pero solamente funciona cuando tienes una gran regeneración de vida. Y el pícaro, con el parche 1.1.0, pues dejó de tener tanta regeneración de vida y pues ya no sirve para nada con el pícaro. Me desagradó bastante ese cambio, la verdad. Destruyó la supervivencia de mi pícaro, y estoy trabajando, pues, trabajando entre comillas, para traerlo de nuevo a la vida, por así decirlo. Ahora dicen evidentemente que todo lo que han dicho, pues, no es definitivo, las cosas pueden cambiar, y creo que vamos a traer de nuevo nuestro resumen y vamos a completarlo un poquito, porque básicamente la fecha del parche es desconocida. Sabemos que las notas de parche, a ver,
Adam's being very cautious about it. It's
Notas de parche.
You're not going to experience
miércoles.
something that's totally different from what you just
That's
saw.
right. That's also why we're not releasing patch notes today, and we're going to actually discuss when patch notes will be released later on the stream. So,
vale, más adelante en el directo.
I'm seeing this like a little bit in chat, and people are going like, "Hey, you guys
Más
are
tarde
adjusting."
van a discutir cuándo es la
Druid
fecha.
summons and their minions. Same thing with like there's a lot of questions about like, hey, what's the overall plan on like minion builds and so forth in the future? Is that something you guys are still going to want to work on, look at in the future?
I can talk about this for a very long time. Yes, Druid and Necromancer are a little bit different, so I guess I'll talk Necromancer first. So Necromancer minions is absolutely a core fantasy of Necromancer players, that minions are cool and awesome. And
Están hablando de los
have the dead fight for you.
bichos del nigromante, tus esqueletos, tus
Minions,
cosas.
it turns out, in all games, not just ours, or summons or all that, are very complicated and hard to make work. They have a lot of moving parts that are different than every other class and build archetype in many games. They have AI, they have a passive and active component to them typically. There's a lot going on. So in this patch, we're not touching the Necromancer stuff a lot. It is on the team's radar of looking at the ways that they scale, looking at the ways that things proc with them, looking at just
Dicen que
the
básicamente los
combination
mínimos en
of
general
passive versus
son
active
difíciles de
activity that we want
manejar,
the player to do there.
de crear básicamente
So
para
there's
estos
definitely a lot
juegos.
going on there. We are thinking about it. There will be stuff coming, but no
Y
promises on
debido a
when,
eso,
but we
no
are
los están
actively
cambiando de
talking about
momento,
it.
pero nos aseguran
Druid
que
is a little bit different, 'cause from the ground
que
up, the class
deberían
fantasy
llegar
is not
cambios en el
those
futuro
things,
para
right?
el
It's like a
nigromante y que el
specific
druida
golden way to play.
pues no deberían
One of the
traer
things that we
este
were
tipo de
concerned
cambios
about
al
when
menos.
launching the game is we didn't want the druid to like have just as many or more companions than the necromancer, and they're stronger.
Ojo.
It's like, where's the fantasy of the necromancer if the druid does it better,
Básicamente
right?
no
So that
quieren
was
que
something that we
el druida
contended with a lot.
sustituya al
I'm sure
nigromante
that
como
we're gonna
pues
flex on that
la
over time.
clase
We
que
did
tiene
add support. We
mascotas.
still love
Por eso
companions on
simplemente
druid,
no,
and we will
no
absolutely
van a
be
traer
making
en el
it more of
futuro
a
los
thing,
mismos
hence why
cambios
we're
para el
looking
nigromante
at
que para el
this
druida.
patch. But we are careful about the design space and the fantasy of the different classes, right? We don't want all the classes to be exactly the same because then you don't feel different when you're playing. You don't have new interesting mechanics that are between them.
Quieren básicamente que las clases se sientan diferentes.
It's very easy to be like, hey, just
Básicamente que
this
apelen a
class
diferentes
doesn't have
tipos de
this, and it's
jugadores.
fun, give it to all the others, right? I think Necromancer and move speed is part of that, where we overcorrected a little bit, where like we didn't want them to have a teleport or dash, right, like a rogue. If Necromancers are dashing around everywhere, that's a weird fantasy, right?
Parece que
But-
se les
but
pasó un
not
poquito
giving
la
them enough
velocidad del
movement speed
nigromante.
options at all, I think is something that we're coming back on.
Yeah.
So, but it's a push and pull, right? It's on a spectrum of how far do we go to
Y
go
evidentemente,
into another class's fantasy or an archetype
el balance
that
siempre es
doesn't
un...
make sense fantasy-wise
Pues
versus
siempre lo vas
keeping true
haciendo...
to the core and finding clever ways to fix it, or we can't fix it and we do need to bend
¿Cómo
it.
decirlo?
And it's
Yes.
always a
El-
conversation.
It's also interesting.
En
to see
resumen,
the
el balance
feedback
no es
from
fácil.
the companions. Like we knew that they were really cool, but like the number of druid players who are looking for more ways to kind of make more companion-focused builds is maybe a little bit higher than we expected.
Yes.
So this is one of those situations where, like, kind of in response to the fact that players are really hoping, like, druid players are looking to go after this fantasy of like, I am the master of the animal kingdom, and I'm going to have all these and nature, right? I'm going to have all these buddies with me. I think it's kind of like moving our hand a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, actually there is something really cool here. There is fantasy here for us to really latch onto and more that we can do. But to Adam's
Absolutely.
point, it's still very important we make sure that the necromancer feels distinct and the druid feels distinct after these changes go in.
Correct. It's the eternal struggle for us on class design.
Sure.
Yeah. We also have a lot of like quality of life items that we wanted to talk about that we actually kind of hit on last week
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
when we were talking
Okay.
on the campfire chat that would be coming in 1.1.1. And I know we wanted to talk a little bit more about those here. I know we have some changes coming for like monster density, for instance.
Yeah, I want to talk
Okay.
about monster density. So we've said a few times now that we're going to increase monster density in Nightmare Dungeons and Helltides. These changes are in 1.1.1, like we said last week. And I think we have an image of an example of a Nightmare Dungeon. So this is how it is
Vale,
today.
actualmente así es como es la
If you go
densidad
into
actual
Strata's Deepwood,
de los
of
monstruos,
course,
básicamente
monsters
en
are gonna
en
not
los
be
dungeons,
exactly,
estos potenciados.
like this, but this is an example of it.
Ese es
And
un,
then
un
in
ejemplo básicamente de
1.1.1,
más o menos cómo
it's
es.
gonna change, so you can see a
Y
lot
este es un
more
ejemplo de
monsters.
cómo va a ser después.
And this is really going back to, we talked about our...
A ver, se nota que ha
our
aumentado la
mission
densidad de los
last game
monstruos, va a ser una
of,
putada, sobre todo
after
cuando
you've achieved your build,
tengas que
to be
matar
able to
absolutamente
go
todo.
in and,
Pero personalmente creo que es mucho más divertido tener más
bichos
bichos que matar. Es más molesto, es más lento, pero es más divertido y también ganas más experiencia por cada dungeon. Así que básicamente el aumento de la densidad de monstruos en calabozos.
On Helltide, we've been doing the same thing, increasing density. As I said last week, there are some areas of Helltide that are highly dense, and we want to make sure that all of our players across all of the different platforms that we support can enjoy this increased density. So it's not just the people with the absolute top-end equipment. So we've also been making sure that as we bump up these densities, that we're doing it in a way that performance stays reasonable.
Quieren evidentemente aumentar la densidad de los monstruos y mantener el desempeño del juego pues bien, por así decirlo, pues que no tengas problemas de rendimiento básicamente.
So we've been working on that at the same time so that we can really hit that target. And this is something too that when 1/1 comes, 1/1.
111.
We gotta have like
Triple one.
we gotta have a different name for these patch notes. For these patches, it's fine. It's fine.
A ver.
When that comes out, we're going to be looking at the density there and seeing how close it comes to this mission statement, this goal, right? And if it's not hitting this goal, then we're going to keep working toward that.
Básicamente dice que van a ver si esta cantidad de densidad de monstruos es buena. Y claro, si no es buena, pues se lo van a aumentar, evidentemente.
Right, so once we're able to capture more data from players on live, we can see how players with different like PC specs are able to interact with some of these spaces. It's going to continue to inform us and let us do more and more double down some of these decisions as we go.
And then I know we have some changes coming in regards to bosses and so forth as well.
Okay, hay algunos cambios para voces.
We have gotten a lot of feedback before about the about players, particularly like in World Tiers 3 and 4, fighting like dungeon bosses and world bosses, and being able to go in there with their enhanced power. Now they've got like some uniques online. Their build has really come online. And they've got like a lot of like damage to vulnerable targets, like they're mowing through some of these bosses faster than we expect, right? So, or rather, fast enough that's not really challenging and not really engaging. So we are boosting the health of bosses in World Tiers 3 and 4, at brackets as you're kind of going up.
Van a aumentar la vida
but in exchange for this, in exchange of making some of these
de los bosses, pero a cambio
as players are going through them, we are also going to be making a change to the rewards that you get going through these.
Van a aumentar las
now,
recompensas.
After 1.1.1 goes live, dungeon bosses starting at level 35 even, so this is before you can get into World Tiers 3 and 4. And then it's the so once you've done that, or once you've killed those, you're going to have a guaranteed legendary item drop in that space. And that's going to carry up as well into World Tiers 3 and 4. When you complete a Legion event, that's going to also give you a guaranteed legendary drop starting at level 35. There's a chance before.
Básicamente nos van a ir dando pues legendarios asegurados.
And then
más objetos en general.
Butcher has a 100% chance to drop a legendary as well.
Está hablando del carnicero.
Boss, of course. And then another really big one is we got, and this is funny. I did it.
Interesante.
Please don't follow me on Twitter unless you really want to see a lot of new stuff.
Vale.
But I did a Twitter poll a while ago.
Que no me sigan en Twitter o algo así.
So what do you think is the chance in which a treasure goblin will drop a legendary item? And I said it was 10%, 25%, 40%, 50%.
Una encuesta que hizo hace mucho tiempo sobre los goblins, los rasgos del tesoro,
their feelings on it as they were kind of going through it. But the reality is
sobre que la gente prefiere si los goblins arrojen más o menos legendarios.
And that's going back to level 35. They've got a very, very high chance to drop legendary items, but so
what you're saying is sometimes I kill a treasure goblin and it doesn't drop a legendary item.
That's correct. That's exactly right. So basically, if you flip a quarter every 25 minutes, that's basically your chance to get a legendary item when you're fighting treasure goblins in the overworld. And it's very easy to have tails 5 times in a row, and then
that's what happens to me every time.
And as humans, we are 7 times more likely to remember a negative thing than a positive thing. So this is nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with the player's perception of treasure goblins not feeling rewarding. You don't see them that frequently relative to other content types, and when you don't get a legendary item from something called a treasure goblin, that can feel bad. So what we decided to do is we've gone back and said, starting right at level 15 for treasure goblins, 15, they have a guaranteed legendary item drop chance.
Vale, a partir de nivel
that point forward. So now
15,
goblins in the map, you start
15?
Snortling around in the corners of your screen. You need to go fight that thing.
Vale, están aumentando, básicamente hacen que los goblins, los trajos del tesoro, siempre te den legendarios, pero a parir de cierto nivel. 15 es 15, si no mal recuerdo. Así que a partir de nivel 15, los trajos del tesoro pues te dan legendarios asegurados. No lo vamos a poner en el resumen, creo que no es tan importante. Debería yo reducir esto un poquito. Ojalá se vea bien aún.
Into the frame.
We have a plush treasure goblin just off screen.
We have a very large plush.
Here's this giant treasure goblin that absolutely doesn't fit on.
Ese es un peluche de un goblin del tesoro.
Staring at Joe as he's literally talking
we have a lot of other stuff to discuss.
Staring at Joe as he's literally talking about killing him. So yeah.
They're happy to be of help.
It is a plush. It is a plush creature. So yeah.
Vamos a ponerlo aquí mientras tanto, pero luego lo quitamos si aparece algo importante. Goblins.
when we were on the stream last week, sorry, about 2 weeks in a row, you guys, we talked about respecs and so forth. So I know that is also coming in.
Yeah,
in 1.1.1.
we just want to confirm that the stuff we said last week, we're going to reduce
Ok,
respec cost by
van a
40%.
hablar de otro tema que desde la semana pasada.
And Elixir stack count is going to go up to 9.
Yeah, and the stash app is just purchasable by gold.
right.
So that's just to make sure that people don't
Eh,
selling it.
La semana pasada, si no mal recuerdo, dijeron que iban a aumentar la cantidad de espacio que tienes en el banco.
For your seasonal stash and for your eternal stash.
Yes, exactly. And then one other thing that
no alcancé a escuchar eso.
because this was a question that came up last week.
Pero básicamente,
in regards to
parece
like
que
the leaving dungeon options and like teleporting out of dungeons and so forth. And I know you wanted to talk more about
luego
that
vemos
here,
eso de nuevo.
today.
I don't know. I think I explained it pretty well last time.
So clear.
So clear.
There's a loop there. I don't know why anyone's confused. This is very clear.
Están hablando de algo que hablaron de la semana pasada sobre por qué aumentaron la cantidad de tiempo para salir de un calabozo.
We have in Diablo 4 we have a mechanic where when you're casting some kind of spell or power and you get hit by some damage, you don't get interrupted immediately. You have to take about 5% of your
Vale, dice que cuando casteas un hechizo de este estilo, puedes recibir un golpe y no ser interrumpido.
Saving a prisoner, absolutely, yeah.
Every time.
So if you're taking like really incidental damage, it's not going to get interrupted.
Así que claro, pues
But
a veces no sucede
we were
nada.
worried about a case where you're in the middle of
Y claro,
a
están
high intensity combat fight, or in the middle
Están
of a
preocupados
boss fight,
sobre la situación
and
en la
felt
que
like
los jugadores
it was a little
puedan
bit too easy to get out of
pues
that.
salir muy fácilmente del
That's
combate,
actually what it's referring to, the loop.
pues simplemente
Which
con un
again,
portal. Entonces, básicamente aumentaron
I felt like I nailed it,
el
but
tiempo.
I guess, you know.
Básicamente aumentaron el tiempo que
and
tardas
so,
en salir de un
there
calabozo
are
para
other
que la
ways that we
gente
could
pues
have
no
solved that,
abuse
right? We could have said, like,
de la
well,
capacidad de
you get
salir de un
pushback on your
calabozo de forma
task, or
sencilla
like,
pues para salir de
well, it's
algún
only
combate
increased
pues bastante
for 5
peliagudo.
seconds if you're in a boss fight or something like that. But ultimately, you know, what players really accurately pointed out is, look, this slows down the core loop of the game.
Y claro, el problema es que esto hace que pues juegues más lento en general.
Yeah, so it was at 3 seconds, went to 5 seconds, going back to 3 seconds.
Y ahora, claro, están
Obviously,
revirtiendo el
player
tiempo.
From everyone,
Están
so-
revirtiendo el cambio. Va a volver al tiempo original, pues porque la gente pues se enojó bastante.
Endgame experience, tiers 3 and 4, and you know, Nightmare Dungeons are a really big part of that. Last week we talked about how we were going to be ensuring that the Nightmare Dungeon difficulty was scaled more appropriately. So now, like, you know, the tier 70 difficulty was the old version. Rather, the old version of tier 70 is now tier 100.
Van a reducir
More accurately reflect the balance we have.
la dificultad de los calabozos.
Kind of insane overtuned stuff we had prior for the tier 70 plus content. One other thing that we obviously are thinking about, like, you know, the scaling difficulty is one part of this, you know, but we also get plenty of feedback on some of the nightmare affixes themselves. And we know that some of these
Y
are
han
sort
recibido
of,
bastante
ones
opiniones
you're gonna
sobre
wanna basically throw in the trash right away. So you're gonna wanna salvage these
básicamente
to get
las
to the
modificaciones
best
que tienen
immediately
estos calabozos
when some
potenciados.
kind of pop up. So a couple of the ones that we're actually going to be, for now, we're going to be removing a few of these. As we
Y
think about
van a
moving
remover
them,
algunos
trying to
afijos,
them.
ok.
But we're going to be taking these out in 1.1.1. They're not going to appear anymore. That is, so the first is Resource Drain. It's not going to be showing up in Nightmare Sigils anymore. Cold Enchanted is not going to be showing up in Nightmare Sigils anymore.
Oh, no
for a
escuché.
bit. And then Backstabber is being removed as well.
Están reduciendo 3.
Now, this is not by
Y el
any
único que me di
means,
cuenta que conozco es el de
exhaustive
hielo,
list
cuando
of
los
things we
enemigos
want to, like,
básicamente
adjust on the
pues te
affix side.
congelan
There's lots of things
abusivamente.
we want to do to kind of improve this experience. This is just sort of like
Muy
a,
probablemente el otro
well,
sea el de
we do
veneno
these
y
things,
puede
we
que
do
haya
these
otro
problematic
que
and
te
just
reduce, por
one
ejemplo, la cantidad de energía a distancia. No estoy seguro si es eso. Sé que la gran mayoría de jugadores tenía grandes problemas cuando los enemigos reducían tu energía, cuando los enemigos te congelaban y a veces cuando los enemigos te envenenaban. No es seguro, no puedo asegurar que es eso, tengo que volver a escucharlo y revisar los nombres en inglés, pero están quitando 3 afijos de calabozos potenciados que son pues bastante molestos.
Obviously, we talked about the date for the patch notes beforehand.
I don't know what you mean.
But we do want to specify like that we are going to be releasing patch notes, full patch notes next week. It's actually going to be on August 2nd next week on Wednesday. We'll be releasing full patch notes, and then 1.1.1 is going to be coming out on August 12th, which is Tuesday. So players will... Did I get those dates right? Yes. I'm doing this by memory. I'm doing it by memory.
No idea.
I've seen so many calendars in the last day.
Tuesday after.
Oh, sorry. It is. No, I lied.
It
is August 8th.
Yeah.
See, this is dates. Just
Everything's
flying through my head.
August 8th.
Sorry, August 2nd is when the patch notes will be coming out in full, and then August 8th is when the patch will actually hit.
Okay,
Sorry,
August
I apologize.
8th.
I've had a lot of dates in my head
de
over the past couple
agosto.
weeks,
Sorry,
so,
we buffed the date.
Yeah, buff the
Buff
date.
the dates.
That's
Just
also
like
part
8
of
de
the
agosto,
patch notes.
8 de agosto.
So players will be able to see everything next Wednesday. We'll be posting those, so make sure to stay tuned. Of course, on the Diablo social media, etc. We'll end up updating the patch notes there, so players can see it. Just remember, the patch is not that day. We're just posting the notes early, so that players
Básicamente están diciendo que van a publicar las notas antes de tiempo. Seguramente para recibir un poco de feedback de los jugadores y ver si pues las notas de parche son pues aceptables, y luego las notas de parche, el parche como tal va a llegar el 8 de agosto, en un par de semanitas, la verdad.
We do want to jump into Q&A because we just went through a whole bunch of stuff right here.
Ok, vamos con el preguntas y respuestas.
As we start to populate questions, feel free to ask them in chat on Twitch, by the way, because we have chat enabled there. But I know one question and something that we talked about last week as we're waiting for questions to kind of come in was about XP in later game.
Ok, van a contestar una pregunta de la semana pasada.
Do we have any update in regards to that?
¿Hay algún cambio en relación a la cantidad de experiencia que ganas al final del juego?
You know, we are not looking to make the game feel slower across the board. We're not looking to like slow down the players' like XP gain rate in response to like feedback about some of the other changes that we had made. You know, the goal was really, we want to make sure the players are having a good time progressing through World Tiers 3 and 4, not feeling like they're hitting a point where it's really, really difficult to make progress. So in response to some of these thoughts, we had gone through and we had raise the amount of experience that you gain from...
Básicamente lo que han hecho, que ya lo han hecho, es aumentar un poco la experiencia que vas ganando.
Raise the amount of experience gain you get from...
yo eso me lo sé de los calabozos, por ejemplo, de la Mara Infernal, de los susurros también. Y claro, con el aumento de densidad que va a haber a partir de ahora, debería también aumentar la experiencia.
Players are getting through some of this content and the kinds of behavior incentivizing as a result of that, right? We want to make sure that players feel that they can play the way that they want and they can progress at a decent pace. But now that we've made a number of these changes, we do want to see what the impact's going to be on the overall XP gain rate across the board for players and just seeing how different kinds of players are progressing. So that when we go through and we make changes, which we will be making soon, I think probably likely for Season 2,
dicen que pues muy probablemente para lo que vendría a ser la temporada 2, es decir, dentro de unos 3 meses, puede que reajusten un poquito el tema de cuánta experiencia vas ganando, claro, con tu personaje en el late game. Básicamente pues porque han agregado una gran cantidad de cambios y puede que haya que reajustarlo. Ahora, otra pregunta.
Can I ask chat a question?
El desarrollador está preguntando algo. Está preguntando si quieren que Adam, la persona que lee básicamente, si quieren que él diga los nombres de las personas que preguntan, básicamente porque siempre está siendo un poquito meme de que Adam siempre pues se complica mucho en leer los nombres.
People are all like, no.
I knew it.
Well,
okay.
Honestly, it would make my job so much
Okay. Q&A.
Well, we're going to read these at least.
The question is about crowd control. Obviously, it is a huge and popular topic amongst the community.
Okay, quiere una pregunta sobre el CC.
Crowd control. What are we planning on doing about that here in the future?
I bet we all have thoughts on that, actually.
We do, yeah.
Yes.
Let me just say first
crowd control, básicamente
we think that
ralentizados, stuneados,
as you get into situations where there are
congelados.
lots of monsters on screen and high-end areas where the amount of damage that you're seeing going in and out is really high, so you're having to react really quickly. situations where you're being hard CC'd, or like stun or freeze or something like that, can be much more impactful than they are when the intensity and the pace of combat is lower. And so we want to make changes to CC to
Quieren
make
hacer
that experience
cambios
more fun.
para que sea más divertido,
We want to do that. It's not in 1.1.1.
pero no está
but
en el
that's-
parche
those are changes
1.1.
that we're looking at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's larger CC stuff that
Yeah.
we're discussing internally that we want
Okay.
to kind of pair with a few of the big changes we have planned in the
Yeah.
future.
In fact, we're working on stuff like that for that. Right
No
now.
cambias ese, eso es importante.
There is a question here regarding.
¿Se alcanza a ver dentro?
My favorite question, because I always get this. It's from Cookie Drops. So,
Y se alcanza a ver.
are you guys planning on addressing the issues related to like the imperfectly balanced on Necromancer, the decrep aura on Necromancer, and those are addressed in 1.1.1.
Yeah, we fixed it.
Those are. We just didn't list all the bug fixes
Eh,
and stuff
There's
like
a
that.
whole lot of bug fixes.
Yeah, so you guys will see those with the
Eh,
final
parece
notes,
que
and
se ha
everything,
corregido
but
algo
those
del
are
nigromante. No
addressed
escuché
in,
realmente
in
cuál
this
era el error del
update, and it's
nigromante,
something that I know a lot of
pero
people
hay un
ask,
error
like, "I can only
que
add
está en
one
las
point,
notas
yet
de
it
parche,
says I
una
can
corrección de
add
error
3 and so
para
forth."
los
So,
nigromantes,
most definitely being
que al
fixed
parecer
in
es
that.
relativamente importante.
We've actually just been getting a general decent amount of questions related to resistances and what the intent is going to be with resistances.
Preguntas sobre
in the
resistencias.
future. There's a ton of questions, so lots of names. But
Sure, yeah.
I guess like what's the vision
Sure.
on resistances here in
Yeah,
the future?
I talked
Ok,
about it
¿cuáles
a
van a
little
ser
bit.
los cambios a
The vision is
resistencias?
kind of, I think, what the standard vision of most games is, which is everything is impactful and meaningful and feels good, and you invest and get rewarded for those things at all times. But, reality is a little bit harder than that, but that is kind of the North Star in what we're trying to do. The idea is that when you invest in elemental resistances, you will notice a difference in the damage that you take. We don't want just, armor or damage reduction or any, king stat that is just way better than everything else. That's the
Quieren
only thing we care
equilibrarlo,
about.
evidentemente,
It is tough to find a perfect balance there of
y
what
dicen que es un poco
how
difícil
impactful
encontrar
something should be
pues, el
versus
balance
others,
perfecto.
and then can you negate certain kinds of combat when you max things out or only focus on only one thing? And there's a lot of gray area there that we're talking about, but our goal is that, and when we go and
Y
really
su
take
meta
a deep dive at
es-
it, is one, we don't want you to just stack armor and that's better than everything else. We don't want you
No
to
quieren
stack
que,
just general
que
damage
stackear a
resistance
armadura
and that's
sea la
better than
única
everything
cosa
else.
que haces.
We want elemental resistances to be meaningful, but we also
Quieren
don't want to
que-
get to a place where, you fight a fire boss and you stack all fire resistances and it actually can't hurt
Quieren
you.
que sea
There's always a
relevante
push and pull and
The-
it's one-
the-
la
inverse of that
resistencia,
is
pero no
actually,
quieren
also
que, por
really
ejemplo,
dangerous.
vayas a
You're
luchar contra un
wandering
boss
through
que
the
hace
game,
daño
you
de
don't know
fuego,
what type of
esta que
creature
es daño de
you're
fuego y
obviously
literalmente el
you
boss
don't
no te haga
have to
absolutamente
deal with
nada de
it,
daño.
0%
Entonces quieren
poison
equilibrarlo un
you
poquito,
get.
básicamente.
Based
Eso
on
es lo que
one
están
tick,
diciendo.
like a level 60 poison creature kills you.
Sure.
Right, it's like
It's a
there's
balancing
there's a balancing act. The team is, as we move forward, everything that Adam just said is 100% accurate. We want to make sure that the choices between like armor for mitigation, for damage resistance based on passives, legendary powers, glyphs and paragon nodes, those things are impactful, and that resistance plays a really, really important role. The big difference here is that resistance is a thing that you are going to stack and earn separately, and that they're usually tied to affixes or inherent affixes on rings and jewelry. So it means that some players will be able to go and encounter situations where they are not going to have a predictable amount of resistance when they go into an encounter, which means that we just need to think about what that is going to feel like for that player and imagine a world where they are able to still complete the content, but it's much more effective to have the appropriate amount of resistance. We need to make that feel impactful. Yes. So there's going to be situations where we are going to ensure that if you are getting into a predictable fight against a creature that you know is going to be dealing a certain kind of damage and you don't have resistance in mind when you go into that fight, you're going to be penalized for that. That's going to be a really, really difficult situation for you.
Quieren
But we are, trying to
equilibrarlo, básicamente, es todo lo que está diciendo. Quieren
Quieren
Que a pesar de que no sabes contra lo que te vas a enfrentar, pues que se sientan relevantes. Pero también equilibrar la situación en la que pues tú sabes, cuando tú sabes que algo te va a hacer cierta cantidad de daño y pues que no lo rompas todo, estaqueando un tipo de daño.
Alright, sounds good. There is a
Otra
lot
pregunta.
of questions about mounts and
Monturas.
how we've gotten a lot of feedback about mounts. We've seen Carbot videos. Our friend Carbot Animation made an episode.
Oh, no he visto a Carbot.
About mounts. Very funny if you
Hay que
haven't seen
verlo.
it. Highly recommend checking it out. But,
Carbot es un
are there any,
animador, hace animaciones,
discussions?
parodia
Are you guys
de los
aware,
juegos de
what
Blizzard y de
are you
otros
guys
juegos.
planning on doing, in relation to mounts?
Yeah, there are a few changes here.
Y
So,
cambios a las armaduras.
we want to make mounts feel better,
Monturas.
sort of broadly speaking, and a couple of those things are making sure that the boost feels really good, especially with controller. where it's underperforming, and
Van a
the boost
arreglar el
actually,
problema de los
the
controles.
boost mechanic on the mounts, it actually stacks. There's a bug right now with that on controller where it's not stacking properly. We're going to fix that.
Vale.
And,
Van a mejorar, arreglar un par de
there's a few
problemas
other-
con las
there's-
monturas y los
A
controles.
key part of this is that the mount gets stuck on things, and that's part. That's
Y el problema principal es que la montura se queda atascada en
Yeah,
algunas
for
cosas,
example,
entonces...
we, in theory, the idea that you're riding through an area and some bandits or some skeletons have set up a barricade for you, and you have to sort of like dismount and fight all those skeletons. Like that sounds like
Dicen
a
que la
fun
idea
idea.
es que vayas por ahí por el mundo y de repente te encuentres con bandidos o esqueletos y te pongan una barrera y tengas que enfrentarte a ellos.
And you're like, well, can I like kind of ride around the top of the barricade? And then it's a fight about whether the collision actually touches. Anyway, we're going to fix that. So there's some good changes to mounts coming.
Hoy no, dice que hay un cambio. Voy a retroceder un
And I know
momento
that,
porque
I've
esto
been
creo que
seeing
es
this a lot as
importante.
well, and
Like a fun idea.
Sounds cool.
It doesn't exactly play out that way. You're just sort of annoyed, and you're like, well, can I like kind of ride around the top of the barricade? And then it's a fight about whether the collision actually touches. Anyway,
Básicamente dice que al final pues no resultó ser tan divertido y que claro pues tienen que
and I know
arreglarlo.
that, I've been seeing this a lot as well in chat, and this is something I can answer. Is
Otra pregunta.
I'm seeing a lot of people talk about VRAM, like on PC
Sobre la
and so
VRAM
forth,
de
and,
las gráficas.
how that obviously grows over time with certain players, not all players, but certain players with certain.
Al parecer hay algún error que va aumentando la VRAM con el tiempo.
Just ends up closing itself, and then they have to come back into the game. I know with patch 1.10 there was a
Al parecer eso fue corregido en el parche 1.1.0.
memory leak that we ended up addressing, but then in 1.11, and I know that QA and so forth, our QA team has been working really closely with their graphics engineering team and testing out a fix that's going to be coming in there.
Y
that should be
parece que
helping out a lot of those players,
en
and
el
making sure that
1.1.1 van a seguir corrigiendo este
their
problema.
gameplay and so forth. So that will also be in 1.11.
Básicamente los que hayan tenido problemas con la tarjeta gráfica ya no van a tener o no deberían tener tantos problemas en ese sentido.
There was a question earlier about overpower and the intent behind
Ok,
it.
otra pregunta sobre overpower.
Kind of similar to that
El-
one of Justin's questions. I think there's a lot of questions related to a lot of these
Esta
things that we
es
do
una
quite
mecánica
well,
dentro de
actually.
Diablo
They're
4.
fundamentally like how the
Overpower.
game works, so
Eh,
I understand. So the intent of overpower way back in the day was we really wanted to create a stat that was different than crit and felt meaningfully different that players could chase.
Básicamente querían crear una especie como de crítico que fuera diferente pero que fuera
Where
relevante.
overpower sits now is that
Y ahora-
the idea of it I think is really cool, which is it rewards you for building a really tanky character and you get a big hit of damage that's really, really awesome. It also scales off of your max health and then the current health percent that you
Y
have.
escala
at the time, and then
con
also
tu vida,
scales with
ojo, no
overpower.
sabía eso.
So normally these stats aren't things that you want to scale to kill things, right? So we're trying to add another avenue, a vector to do that. And then the other thing that's unique about overpower and how we didn't want to just turn into critical strike chance and damage like a lot of mechanics do, is that you have a baseline low percent to do it, right? It's 3% across
Y,
everything.
claro,
and you can
todos
never increase that baseline percent.
Tenemos un
ever.
3% de probabilidades de aplicar un overpower.
And then the idea is that you can, however, get guaranteed overpowers by doing certain mechanics. So the
Y la
druid has
idea es
some,
que también
the
hay
necromancer
mecánicas
has some
sobre
where
las
it's like,
cuales
hey, you do
tienes
this thing and
la
the next
posibilidad de
one is
hacer un
guaranteed. So you
golpe
can still
overpower
play around it,
asegurado.
But unlike crit, where you're chasing the random chance to get higher and higher and higher to get those procs, overpower just naturally happens kind of rarely, and then the builds that can use it get it guaranteed. And then that you have different vectors and avenues to scale it. The problem right now
básicamente-
with overpower really is not necessarily an overpower problem, but it's really the crit vulnerable problem of these other things that scale multiplicatively just overshadow overpower in the same way that even dot
Y
damage.
claro,
is
el
pretty much
gran
all
problema de
it's
overpower
overpower
es que
And so when
pues
we're
todo
looking
lo
at a
demás es
revamp,
mejor.
Like the dream and the goal and the utopia we're moving towards is all of these vectors, and not even just overpower.
Y claro,
there's some
pues,
other
lo que
ones
quieren
I
hacer
know
es
I'm
equilibrarlo.
really good at,
Básicamente de eso está hablando.
Those legendary affixes that spawn stuff is another example.
Oh, sure,
Adding
yes, yeah.
Like we want, when we give you a fantasy as a player, whether it's baseline or via legendaries and uniques, that you're able
Por cierto,
to
nadie
build
me ha
that into
dicho
the late game and it's
si de
delivered
casualidad
on.
las
You can
letras se ven
actually
bien,
scale
se ve
and be
bien
just as good as
lo que está
anybody else.
escrito en
That's the
pantalla,
goal.
el resumen se ve bien porque no tengo idea, no tuve tiempo de probarlo y está un poco improvisado y espero que se vea bien. Me encantaría poder ponerle a estas letras un borde negro o algo así con tal de que se vieran mejor, pero lamentablemente no puedo.
And then this is a question that I know everyone talks about. I don't know if this
Otra
group
pregunta.
here can fully answer it, but it's something that we can follow up on, which is the zooming in and zooming out on your character.
Hablan del zoom de tu personaje.
Gameplay and so forth. I know there's like performance implications to that because it increases the draw distance and so forth, and we have a ton of different platforms, so it has to be evaluated in any type of way. We were to
Y evidentemente
change because even when it does zoom out on bosses and so forth, there's like some resolution or scaling and so forth that kind of occurs there. Please don't kill me, engineers, if I'm saying that wrong.
Básicamente los problemas de hacer un zoom out, de alejar a tu personaje, es que pues evidentemente tienes que dibujar más gráficos y tienes problemas de rendimiento. Creo que no dijo nada relevante para ese radar, básicamente. Puede que me equivoque. Otra pregunta. Preguntan si planean agregar más customización, más cosméticos, por ejemplo, tipo mascotas o ese estilo de cosas.
Additional more content for players to play through at the moment, more so than some of the cosmetic pieces and so forth. But it is something I know that players have been asking for.
Yeah, we want to add more stuff like that.
Y evidentemente quieren agregar más cosas.
That stuff is really fun to add.
Evidentemente, más cosas que vender.
Right now, what was really important is helping sorcerers.
Pero dicen que de momento, pues, el objetivo es otro, no aumentar, claro, los cosméticos, sino que, pues, mejorar el juego en general.
One thing that people have been asking about is like all the changes that they're seeing today. Is this like encapsulating everything that we're doing? We had a question in here regarding, like, for instance, someone enjoyed playing a frozen orb sorcerer.
Otra pregunta, por cierto.
Like Diablo 2, for instance, and wanting to have that same type of fantasy in Diablo 4. Do you guys plan on doing additional adjustments in the future regarding other builds or like creating
Básicamente preguntan pues si el parche que están haciendo pues resume todo lo que están haciendo y dicen que pues entre comillas en general se vienen más cambios, o sea,
every fantasy that we sell you, and I can talk a lot about that. I talk to the team about this all the time. Like,
and by sell,
yeah, all right, yeah, sell is probably the bad word. I think that way, like
we're advertising it. Like if you see it on legendary aspects,
that's really what I mean.
You see it on passives, you see it on skill tags. Like we're saying, like, hey, look, this is a cool thing for you to go after.
When we show you something that is cool and awesome, we deliver on it, right? Like when you log into Necromancer, you see right away, just when you see your basic skills, like, hey, there's a
básicamente la respuesta a la pregunta es que no. El parche no es un resumen básicamente de lo que están haciendo. Evidentemente se vienen más cambios. Y evidentemente quieren darte pues esos diferentes tipos de mecánicas que va un poco enfocada a esa pregunta sobre diferentes builds y cosas así.
Ideally really fun and exciting for players to chase. Like that's always what we're going to be trying to do. So yeah, this isn't exhaustive forever. We are always going to be adapting and updating things. And
y obviamente siempre van a ir actualizando, siempre van a ir pues haciendo cambios,
hey, that thing it was awful. Make it something good, right? Like at the end of the day, the players are the ultimate
dice que los jugadores son los jueces finales, pues básicamente del propio juego. Esa es buena filosofía, pero hay que tener un poco de cuidado, en mi opinión.
What kinds of passives, what kind of aspects are they wearing, what kind of uniques are they using, like, and we can say, you know, so like we know when like if no one's equipping a particular aspect. Like we can see that, but like, okay, well, that's clearly something we're going to want to rework or update.
Y dicen que, claro, pues si nadie está usando algo, esa es, claro, una señal de que tienen que cambiarlo.
And the reality is this is through iterations of the conversation with the community and also looking at this kind of data.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we have a ton of changes here coming up for 1.1.1 that you guys got to see here, especially for class changes. Thanks, Adam, for kind of walking us
through. Okay, esto suena a despedida. Parece que se están despidiendo ya.
We do have final patch notes coming next Wednesday. That is August 2nd. So just a reminder on that.
Están repitiendo básicamente lo que está escrito en el resumen, que ya está en pantalla todo el tiempo ya.
That's my tick. Someone called out my tick earlier, and so forth. Stop that, Adam. That's my tick. I will stop that one day. probably won't. But we actually do have our patch for 1.1.1. The date will be on August 8th as well. So players can expect patch notes next Wednesday.
Básicamente
and then,
tenemos
1.1.1 hitting on August 8th, which is
las
Tuesday.
notas de
So,
parche
looking
unos
forward to
cuantos
seeing,
días antes del
everyone's
parche
feedback,
real.
everyone jumping in and checking out, of course, the new changes coming to pretty much every class now, and in regards to balance changes and so forth. Oh, I did it again.
And so forth.
Now you're in your own head.
Now,
Be like
now,
clap every time.
now I'm just stuck in this like my
Pez
own
Radar
empty
tiene una
loop
muletilla
saying
que repite
over
todo el
and
tiempo
over.
y pues se están riendo de eso.
And get us feedback on how this went, like, and how you like this format for talking about patch notes.
Exactly. Yeah, we want to see if this worked out really well with the community. So yeah, please provide feedback.
Y básicamente pues piden opiniones.
Releasing the notes afterwards. It's a huge help for us and how to communicate with you guys out in the community. So thank you guys again. We hope you enjoyed this Campfire Chat ++, New Game ++. And,
Sí, se están despidiendo
we will
básicamente.
see you,
Hasta aquí llega el
on our
directo.
next stream, which we haven't announced on. We're thinking about doing some Campfire Chats with like maybe other teams here, whether it's our art animation teams, audio teams.
Están pensando quizás en hacer otros tipos de directos con otros miembros del equipo, como los miembros de arte y cosas así.
From other people. So we do plan on expanding these a little bit more, and of course having Campfire Chats and dev update streams to talk more about the game, gameplay, and design.
Y claro, ir pues hablando más del juego en general. Y parece que volvió a decir la muletilla y pues por eso pues, se pone así. El caso.
Thank you again from the Diablo 4
Por cierto,
team here
el
at
caso es una
Blizzard,
muletilla
and,
mía.
yeah, have a great Friday.
Thanks, everybody.
Y despedida. Ok, básicamente eso es todo. ¿Podemos poner una pantalla negra? Así como para, pues... Creo que el fondo de Discord debería estar relativamente bien. A ver cómo se ve el fondo. Pues mal. ¿Cómo mierda destaco estas letras? Creo que... Así. Vale. Evidentemente no hay nada de fondo. Es un fondo negro. Pero básicamente este ha sido el resumen de la actualización de los desarrolladores. Y vamos a hablar un poquito de esto. Muy poquito. Vamos a terminar el directo pues básicamente al tiro. En general, primero las notas de parche largas, completas, van a llegar el miércoles 2 de agosto en una semana realmente. El miércoles concretamente. Y ya tenemos unas cuantas notas, por cierto, que se pudieron ver en el mismo video. Vamos a volver a colocar esto, ¿vale? En el propio video podemos ver algunas notas de parche. Por ejemplo, aquí tenemos algunos cambios al nigromante, pues por dar un ejemplo. Pues para que se vea, aquí se ve que pues hicieron, por ejemplo, un poco de equilibrio para el nigromante. Pero el caso es que básicamente se vienen las notas completas oficiales el miércoles y el parche se lanza el 8 de agosto, que parece que es un martes. No estoy del todo seguro si le estoy atinando bien a la fecha. 2 más 7 es 9, sí, creo que es un martes. El martes de la siguiente semana básicamente llega el parche 1.1 y viene con mejoras principalmente para el mago y para el bárbaro. Para el mago vienen cambios de daño y supervivencia, tanto para los legendarios, para el nivel Paragon y para las habilidades. Y para el bárbaro llegan principalmente mejoras de regeneración de recursos y daño. También hay que decir, y no lo puse en esta lista, y es que también llegan mejoras generales para todas las clases. Un poquito de daño para los pícaros, por ejemplo. Un poquito de regeneración y daño para los druidas. Un poquito de equilibrio para el nigromante. En general, pues mejoras para todas las clases, pero principalmente para bárbaro y para mago. Además de esto, se vienen algunos cambios para los objetos únicos y objetos legendarios también. Muy en relación con, claro, lo anterior sobre los cambios para bárbaro y para mago. Luego, sabemos también que van a aumentar la densidad de los monstruos en los calabozos potenciados, en estos los calabozos que abres con sellos. Y Junto con esto, los bosses van a tener más vida y van a dar más recompensas. Y con los bosses me refiero a los bosses que encuentras a partir de dificultad 3 y dificultad 4. No son todos los bosses, dificultad 1 y dificultad 2 van a seguir iguales, pero bosses de dificultad 3 y dificultad 4 van a aumentar tanto su vida como sus recompensas. Es decir, son más fáciles, son más difíciles de matar, pero van a dar, claro, pues más cositas. Así que en ese sentido, pues bastante bien. Creo que incluso van a dar algunos legendarios asegurados. Así que, pues bastante bien. Luego tenemos que los goblins también van a dar a partir de nivel 15 legendarios asegurados. Creo que dijeron nivel 15. Antes de eso, pues no sé si te van a dar legendarios. Pero la cosa es que a partir de cierto nivel, todos los goblins, todos los trasgos del tesoro te van a dar legendarios. Está bastante bien. Luego tenemos que van a ajustar la dificultad de los calabozos potenciados. Actualmente los niveles, por ejemplo, llegan hasta nivel 100 con los calabozos potenciados. Y lo que quieren hacer es que el nivel 100 actual tenga la dificultad de un nivel 70 actual. Es decir, van a reducir más o menos la dificultad de una gran cantidad de calabozos. Los van a reajustar para que pues sea un poquito más fácil en general. También sabemos que a estos calabozos les van a quitar algunos modificadores que han estado causando pues algunos problemas. Tengo que volver a escuchar en el directo cuáles son los potenciadores, pero capté por ejemplo que van a quitar el potenciador, las modificadores básicamente de los calabozos potenciados, que por ejemplo hace que todos los enemigos élites tengan el afijo de congelado. Ese es uno de los afijos que pues más molesta a la gente, pues meten mucho CC los enemigos y literalmente pues te revientan. No quieres normalmente tener el afijo de que todos los enemigos pues son congelados. Como este han quitado tres modificadores. Como digo, no puse toda la atención que debería haber puesto y tampoco conozco los nombres de los potenciadores, por lo tanto, la verdad es que no podría, aún poniendo atención, no habría podido identificar cuáles son. Pero el caso, van a quitar tres modificadores que son bastante liosos, bastante molestos de los calabozos potenciados y creo que eso está bastante bien. Por último, una pequeña discusión justamente referente a esto, por ejemplo a los enemigos que te van congelando, es que no van a haber cambios al CC. Con esto se refiere a que los enemigos, por ejemplo, los enemigos que te congelan, pues cuando te congelan mucho, pues te congelan, no puedes moverte, te matan. Es bastante molesto, es bastante injusto de cierta manera, no tienes maneras pues de que no te congelen de forma masiva. Y de momento no van a llegar cambios a lo que vendría a ser el CC. Eso sí, destacaron que debido a que ahora van a haber más monstruos dentro de los calabozos, podría generarse ciertas situaciones debido a este tema del CC. Así que ahí hay que tener un poco más de cuidado, debido a que más monstruos implica más CC. Por lo tanto, pues aquí se viene cierto se viene cierto Armagedón para Diablo 4. Más enemigos y mucho más CC. Va a ser un puto caos. El caso, vamos a ir quitando esto. No, ahí soy yo. Hola. Estoy calvo, por cierto. Vale, ¿dónde está mi gorro? Aquí está mi gorro. Vamos a tapar esta calvicie un momento. Un poquito de luz. Ahí se me ve mejor. Por cierto, polera de PlayStation. No quería mostrar esto. Apreté el botón sin querer. Mostré la calva sin querer. No quería mostrar la calva. El caso. Eso es todo. Este es el directo. Evidentemente puedo dejar el link de esto en el chat del directo por si alguien quiere ir a revisarlo. Yo tengo mismo que revisarlo también. Ups. Pues la cagué un poquito. Ahí sí, perdón. El primero no. Voy a eliminar el primero. Antes de que alguien lo vea. Listo. Un par de veces por si alguien lo quiere. Y básicamente es eso, gente. Eso ha sido todo el directo. Ya hemos... Pues si quieres ver el resumen, ya lo he mostrado bastante. Y ya lo hemos discutido también un poquito. Así que nada más, gente. Hasta aquí llega el directo. ¿Dónde mierda he puesto el botón de final? Aquí está. Puede que haga un video hablando simplemente de pues el resumen como tal, para que la gente no tenga que ver este directo. Por cierto, este directo ya lleva 1 hora y cuarto. Bastante improvisado al inicio. Pero eso, vamos a ver si hacemos un directo con un pequeño resumen, que podría ser el final de este directo. La verdad, hemos hecho un resumen al final de este directo. Y nada más, gente, ahora sí, Muchas gracias a los que hayan estado, a pesar de que no hayan hablado. Puño. No sé si aún estás aquí. Espero que te vaya bien y muchas gracias por ser la única persona que comentó en el directo. Y nada más, gente. Eso ha sido todo. Nos vemos en otra ocasión y no sé si tengo que cuadrar el final del directo para que ustedes vean todo esto y para que